Being 7 o'clock, we'll get started. We join you in a pledge to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Lynn, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Grover?
Here.
Mrs. Sullivan?
Here.
Mr. Holchanski?
Here.
Mrs. Vanderwater?
Here.
Ms. Wozniak?
Here.
Mr. Tucker?
Here.
Mr. Zachariah?
Here. All right. We'll ask for a motion to approve the minutes of October 18th.
So moved.
Second.
Any comments, revisions? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Seeing none, the motion passes. Citizens' comments. Anyone wishing to address the board? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to item number 1, our vouchers. Vouchers totaling $88,532.85. Reviewed, Jen?
Yes.
Yes. I'd like to make a motion to approve.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. On to item number 2, public hearing on local law K 2023, amending vehicles and traffic with respect to regulation of fire lanes. Anyone wishing to speak in favor of this law?
Did you go
I'll make
in?
a motion that
Oh,
we
I'm
open
sorry.
the public hearing on local law K.
I'll second.
I skipped that part. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Seeing none, we are now in public hearing. Now, anyone wishing to speak in favor of local law K 2023? Seeing none, anyone wishing to speak in opposition to this law? All right, anyone have any comments from the board? All right, I guess we're...
Real quick, I'm sorry,
Yes,
I'll
go
just
right
say
ahead.
that I believe that it is a serious issue. We do have fire lanes in front of the Big M and in front of Tops, and it is creating hazard when people are even just standing there. I don't mean physically standing, but when their cars are stopped there. It's creating a hazard for everybody. Fire trucks and other equipment just can't get through easily. So I think this local law will give our code enforcement officer just a little bit more authority to actually enforce these fire lanes. And I think it'll lead to a decrease in the abuse of the fire lanes.
I agree. All right, we're going to ask for a motion to recess from, go back into regular hearing. Did I get a
Make a
motion?
motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, we're back in regular session. I'm going to ask for approval of this law based on the resolution that's been prepared for local law K 2023.
I'm gonna make that motion.
I'll second.
And do a roll call vote?
Mr. Grover?
Yes.
Mrs. Sullivan?
Yes.
Mr. Holchanski?
Yes.
Mrs. Vanderwater?
Yes.
Ms. Wozniak?
Yes.
Mr. Tucker?
Aye.
Mr. Zachariah?
Yes.
I'm gonna ask Doug, since you do signs, do you have a ballpark idea of what a sign would cost if we added a sign at both locations that say, you know, I'm just gonna throw something out there, pursuant to local law K 2023, all violators will be prosecuted, you know, you may be towed, violations are $100, you know, something like that. If we can put a sign in those 2 locations so residents know that, you know, you can't do this anymore, what a sign like that would cost.
Complete guess, because it is.
Yeah,
custom sign.
complete guess.
I would say probably per sign, you're probably looking between $2 and $250.
So
And
I want to
would
ask
also-
the,
It is actually a requirement that we would have to post signs
that say that, you know,
that they could be
yeah.
fined.
Right.
Yeah.
I would also
Okay.
ask the board to make sure that, because that is private property, that something has to be done there before we could
put the sign up.
post that sign, because it is
Like
on private property.
permission from,
So Nadine, would we just need to send a letter and ask, you know, the manager of Tops or whoever to sign it, giving us permission or to have our folks install that sign? So, okay, so I just want to make sure, and I know Rick just said it's a requirement, but I want to make sure that there's some type of fully, explanatory sign that's going to be put up there. So this isn't like coming out of left field to people, because predominantly, and I'm a violator too, I have parked in front of Tops and ran in for milk, and the sign wasn't there before. Now there is a sign that's posted that says fire lane, you can't park there anymore. But I want people to be fully aware that this has changed. There is a new law. We're not messing around. And so they have some kind of heads up. So thank you for letting us know that that is going to happen.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. I was gonna talk to you about that tomorrow, Doug.
Sounds good.
All right, any other comments on the local law? All right, we'll move on to item number 4, setting a public hearing to consider 2023 Town Special Districts budget for ratification November 15th at 7 PM.
One little change, 2024.
The 2024 budget, yes, that would be more important since,
Gotcha.
and I just said it too. so.
I'll make a motion to set the public hearing for November 15th at 7.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, that motion carries. We'll have our public hearing in 2 weeks.
Actually, we just have to vote on that.
Move on to item number 5, to approve participation in CNY Stormwater Coalition in the amount of $3,600. Again, would you like to speak to that effect?
I would.
Thank you.
I think this will be our 13th year being part of this program. The Stormwater Coalition does the outreach for us. They attend cultural fairs and environmental fairs, things like that to promote the program. That gives us credit with DEC when we have to do our annual reports. They provide training to myself and the highway departments on stormwater, and all this is included in our $3,600 fee, which is the same, has been the same for the last 13 years. And as another note, the coalition was successful in getting a $300,000 mapping grant for catch basins and for everybody in the coalition. It's going to be a requirement, the new DEC permit. It's going to be a big nut for everybody to try to hatch out here. So, the program is great. It's money well spent.
All right. And we have a, no? All right. Could I get a motion?
You have one?
I'll make a motion to approve the CNY Stormwater Coalition amount of $3,600.
Second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. On to number 6. Approval of a pilot for CDS housing.
Would you like me to?
Yeah, why don't you come on up and you can speak to that for us. Nice to see you again.
So this is for the proposed affordable housing development that we've discussed here.
Give us your name and.
Patrick Pinkerton, CDS Housing, 860 Hard Road, Webster, New York. So this request that we have before you today is for our proposed affordable housing development here on Van Buren Road. The proposal that we're putting in place is 5% shelter rent. So essentially it's 5% of our gross rental revenue anticipated, less the utilities that we pay to the local utility companies. Our current estimate for that is $33,000. That would be the year 1 estimate. We would see an escalation, yes.
The 33,000 is the rents?
33,000 would be the tax payment.
Is the tax? Okay.
Correct, yes.
And is that county and school together?
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
that would
it's
include.
combined?
Yes.
Okay.
So that's school, town, county.
Yep.
And the number I have for the school and town taxes for the 2 parcels from 2022 is $2,300. That $33,000, again, it's based off of a 5% of the rents less the utilities. So we would see this increase annually on a rate of somewhere from 2 to 5% a year. The reason I say that is our rents are increased annually on a rate of 2 to 5% a year. 2% is a minimum that we get as of right. We get up to 5% that has to be approved by the state regulating agency that we're funded by. So you could see it go as high as that. So it could fluctuate year to year, but it is tied to the gross that we receive for the development, which is in line with how these developments are traditionally taxed. So,
No, I didn't see that in the agreement where you
So it doesn't-
annual.
yeah, so it doesn't specifically state in the draft pilot agreement, and we could certainly work with you about what language you'd like to see in that. That's just a template agreement that we have. But the reason it doesn't say that is because it's tied to the 5% of our rent, and our rent moves, increases annually at those rates. Again, it'll change year to year. Some years we would get the minimum 2%. Other years, for instance, with our developments in the last year or two, because of the high rate of inflation, we've asked for 4 or 5% and have been granted that by the state for most of our projects. But it depends what the kind of overall market is doing, what they will allow if we have justification for it.
Okay.
Of course, there's two big reasons that we request something of this nature. The first one is having this kind of stability, not just lower rate, but a set rate is extremely important for us because our properties are not set up so that they're going to cash flow a significant amount of money year over year. Because our rents are restricted, we typically see that our cash flow slowly declines as the years move forward, because that's the whole genesis of what we're trying to do here is we're trying to provide affordable housing that is lower than market rate rents. So having this kind of stability built into our pro forma, our annual budget, is extremely beneficial for the viability of the project. And then the second thing that it does is in our submission to the state, which is why we're asking for a commitment letter now, even though we haven't formally gone through the full process with you yet, which we intend to do, if you're open to it, is when we apply to the state, part of the state's scoring system for these types of developments incorporates scoring points for commitments that we get from the town. So we get a benefit based off of the fact that the town rezoned the parcel for us. So that shows a commitment from the town. This is another area where we can increase our scoring and increase our chance of getting the state funding that we need to do the development, because it shows more than just a nominal commitment from the town. It shows a financial commitment from the town. So in our eyes, that's beneficial, certainly for us, but we also feel it's beneficial for the town because it increases our chances of getting this state funding to be able to bring it to Van Buren. And currently we're estimating about $27 million for our total development cost. So that's state money that we would be able to bring here, partly as a result of having this kind of commitment from the town.
Would you have to get permission from the school board as well?
So that's part of the process we'll have to work through with your attorney. I don't know, some counties do this through the IDA. Some places they do it directly through the town. It depends jurisdiction to jurisdiction who has the authority to do that. So we would have to go through that process with your town attorney and potentially with the county if they're involved in it as well.
So this will be kind of a strange question because who wouldn't want a less than market rate apartment? But do you have any capacity issues? Because in this model, if you were at half capacity, we would dip to our revenue.
Sure.
If I'm following this.
Yes, that's correct, because it's tied to the rental revenue, you're correct. No, unfortunately for affordable housing, there is no, every development that we have is either at 100% or every now and then we'll dip to 96, 98% for turnover, but it doesn't take more than, a few weeks to turn over a unit. And we have extensive waiting lists on all our developments, including 2 developments that we have in Cicero, New York, so fairly similar market.
Thank you.
Of course.
I have a question.
Yes.
So there's 2 parties on here, the Apartment Housing Development Fund and then the Apartment LLC. Who are these 2 parties?
So when we get these projects funded by the state, we create a couple separate entities. The Housing Development, the HDFC, the Housing Development Fund Corporation, is essentially a nominal agency that the state will put this entity under. The LLC is then the entity that the taxes would be charged to, that utility bills would go to, and that LLC is then created so that we can work through our ownership structure. So because we receive tax credits for these deals, we don't go use those tax credits. What we do is we go sell that to a third-party investor, like a Bank of America, for instance. And so then they get a significant ownership stake, usually about 99.9% of that LLC, and we take a small ownership stake, but as part of that agreement, we're the manager who's responsible for owning the entity and operating the entity. But the creation of that LLC allows us to then pass the tax credits on to them. So they pay us money up front for the tax credits, which gives us the money to develop it, and they get those future tax benefits. So the HDFC, for our purposes here, is essentially a nominal agency that the state agency, a nominal entity that the state agency places this under. But the LLC is the actual entity that any agreements would funnel through to, because the LLC is the actual entity that operates the development.
And owns it?
Correct.
Okay.
And that ownership is then, all of the responsibilities for that ownership then funnel to CDS Monarch through our
Okay.
agreement.
I was under the impression that the owner was a not-for-profit. Is that not correct?
That is correct. CDS Monarch is a not-for-profit.
Okay, so why is it not in the name of CDS Monarch?
For legal purposes, we have to separate these and create standalone
Gotcha.
entities. Yeah, for insurance and for legal purposes, but most importantly, because in order for us to pass on the tax credit benefits to our investor, we have to create a separate entity that they have ownership of. Obviously, Bank of America doesn't have any ownership of CDS Monarch, so we create this separate entity that they have that ownership of.
Okay, and the 5% that is paid is 5% of the gross rents? Or is
Less.
it 33,000 every year?
No, 5% of the gross rents less the utilities.
So where did the 33,000 come in?
So our current projection, and
Estimate?
yeah, our current
Okay.
projection, and this is just our budget estimate, is our gross rents in year one would be 727,000. Our utilities would be 68,000. So if we take that 68,000 out of the 727 and then take 5% of that, we land at that 33.
33.
That is, of
That's
course,
just
an
an
estimate. It's a
Okay.
pretty solid estimate because we know where our rents usually land, and our utilities are estimated by our energy consultant, and they use market area data. Now, by the time this goes into operation, post-construction, some of those numbers could fluctuate, but if anything, you would see them increase. And it's not stable for whatever the full term of the agreement is, because again, our rents will increase throughout that year over year.
And I think I saw it in here, but are you proposing that the pilot be in effect for 15 years?
That's the minimum that we would like to see, and the reason for that is for our tax credits, our compliance period is 15 years.
Yeah.
So to have that stability through that 15-year window is what our investor would want to see, because that's the period during which, if for some reason we were not in compliance with the state's regulations for affordable housing, they could come and take some of those tax credits back.
Sure.
Pat, when do you, I know we've had this conversation, but when do you expect completion of the project?
So that's all dependent on what round we get funded from the state. There are times that we go in our first submission, like our most recent Cicero project that got awarded in its first submission. There are other projects that we go in 2-3 times before we get an award. We are submitting this coming Tuesday. We would expect announcement of those awards in early spring, so probably about March, maybe April. Then it would take us roughly 6 months to close on all of our financing and begin construction. So the most idealistic timeline would be an award from the state, early '24. We'd begin construction in the latter half of '24, and then we would probably be wrapping up construction in early '26. So like spring of 2026 would probably be the most idealistic timeframe for us to be opening the building and have residents moved in. Which obviously any kind of agreement like this would be tied to that date. During the construction period, once we own it, we would pay taxes. And typically how that works is we start out by paying taxes at the rate that you currently assess it. And then usually, depending on how your assessor evaluates properties, at some point during that period, because we'll be under construction for over a calendar year, they'll do some sort of a prorated value as we've got partial construction completed, but we would be responsible for that, and the pilot wouldn't kick in usually until we get C of O.
When you do your submission to the state for the financing, do you request an amount, or do they tell you the amount that you're, if you're awarded, do they tell you the amount?
So we request an amount from several different funding sources, so from the tax credits, but also some other supplemental capital sources that they have. But they do have limits for how much we can request under each source, so we have to stay within that. Most of those limits are on a per unit basis.
So
it
do you have an
depends
idea? I know this is maybe not off the top of your head, so I apologize if you don't, and if you don't, just say so. But do you have an idea of how much total you're going to apply for grants?
Yes, the total development cost is approximately 27 million.
And you're going to apply for grants for that full amount?
Tax credits and
Yes.
grants.
Okay.
Yes. Yep. CDS is also making, CDS has a charitable division, and we usually make a zero interest loan to a lot of our developments. So CDS is making a $200,000 zero interest loan as part of our capital stack. We're also eligible for some energy incentives. But yes, essentially all through state tax credits and grant sources.
And another random question, sorry.
You're fine.
Your LLC, does that consist of members or corporations, members? How many members are owners of this?
So there would be a managing member entity that CDS would own. So that essentially passes on all of the obligations for operating the development to us. So for all intents and purposes, you would consider us the owner.
Right.
We would be the ones legally responsible for the entity.
Right.
And then there would be our tax credit investor. So it would be those two
Okay.
entities.
So if you are, submitting requests for grants and credits for the full amount of the project, help me understand why we would want to offer you a pilot with a significantly reduced tax credit
Sure.
when you really aren't out-of-pocket funding if everything that you're applying for is granted.
Sure. So everything we're applying for is state grants. So
Sure.
it's state and federal funding. We're a mission-based organization. So the reason that we pursue these developments is because it aligns with our mission. Any revenue that we generate from it, one is upfront revenue that's paid in the form of a developer fee at the time of award or at the time of construction completion for the most part. And we funnel that back into our mission-based services. With respect to the project itself, again, the reason that the tax abatement agreements are beneficial for this is because we're going to operate a development that is an affordable development, that the rents are going to be restricted under a 50-year agreement with the state. And we're not going to see a market rate type property where year over year, we're going to generate cash flow that brings in significant revenue to us. We're going to see a development that our rents are going to increase at a slower rate than our expenses are going to increase. So every year, we're going to start having tighter and tighter cash flow till we eventually get to a point where the project just isn't making money anymore because our rents are capped and we're not a market rate developer. So that's the primary reason, is if we have that, then it makes it more viable for us to operate this building and keep it at a break even longer and have a good projection that we can do that. And then the second thing is, again, when the state goes to evaluate these submissions to provide that capital funding, one of the big things that they look for, that they incorporate into some of their scoring, is the investment from the local town. Now, that investment comes in the form of rezones, support letters, things of that nature that show that the town is in favor of this, the town is taking tangible efforts to try to support affordable housing, but then also financial commitments also play into that scoring. So it's beneficial to us, absolutely, but it's beneficial to the community in the sense that it allows us to operate these developments viably for a longer period, and it also increases the chances that we can bring millions of dollars of state funding to the local area.
Sure. All right, thank you so much. I know I kind of asked you a bunch of.
No, they were excellent questions. I have no problem at all.
I appreciate your responses.
Of course, thank you.
Nadine, I'm just curious, are we approving this pilot today, or are we more or less endorsing the project?
I believe he said that this was just a template and we would need to prepare something. Is that correct?
That's my understanding.
Yeah.
But I believe what the supervisor was looking for is, as part of their application for the state aid, they were requesting a letter from our supervisor endorsing even entering into a pilot agreement. So what you are doing is essentially saying, we will enter into a pilot, terms to be committed to, but that would be part of that state aid application that's going to be
Sure.
filed later.
So right now, you just need a letter from the town of Van Buren saying we are endorsing this project and we will commit to a pilot.
Correct. So a good example is, in order to In order to present our budget to the state for our submission next week, when it comes to our tax credits, we get a letter of interest from an investor who states that they'll buy our tax credits at a certain rate. It doesn't legally obligate that investor to buy our tax credits at that rate, but what it does is when we put our submission in and the state reviews it, they then say, okay, this budget that they put together is realistic because we know this investor is out here saying these are viable numbers. Same concept applies here. There's not time right now for us to go through the full process and get a formal approval and have it reviewed by legal and have a formal agreement executed. We will go through that process in the order and fashion that you guys advise us. But right now, what we're requesting is a commitment letter so that we can then present to the state in our application. We are showing a tax abatement agreement in our budget, and it is justified by the fact that the community is showing a commitment to work through that process, even though we don't have a formal agreement in hand.
Okay.
Otherwise, if we put that in there, the state would say your budget doesn't work because you're putting in funds in here that don't exist.
Nadine, do you have any objections to the template that he provided?
The only thing is, didn't have a term, so that's where the 15 years specifically. So if we're not signing this today or authorizing it, we're just endorsing the project
Well, we're-
with the anticipation of a
right.
15-year pilot.
What we're asking for is a commitment that that the town is going to commit to the pilot. And these are general terms that we're going to be working into the
I can make a
process.
motion to do that.
I'll second.
Any more discussion?
I'll just go on record. I've never been involved in a pilot agreement since I've been serving the board, so this is a little out of my area. I am a full proponent of affordable housing. I do think the town of Van Buren needs more affordable housing. I'm a huge fan of that. In my opinion, when I bring in commercial buyers for the town, my thought is I want to increase our tax base for our residents. This isn't going to do that, but I think the fall off of that is the affordable housing that we need here in the town. So I am in favor of this, and I'm looking forward to that project getting completed in a couple years.
Thank you.
Yes, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Go hang around for. On to number 7, consider revisions to Warner Cemetery rules and regulations. Wendy, actually, I'm going to ask you to speak to this, if you'd like to.
Not really, it's just been kicking around forever. Thank you, Nadine, for kind of wrapping this up. I've kind of been spearheading this agreement for many months, so I'm glad that we're kind of at the point of signature. A few years back in 2008, I guess it was, Warner Cemetery kind of ceased business and handed the cemetery over to the town to kind of take care of, and we've been doing it since. And we needed just to kind of update the existing agreement as to what's going on with that cemetery rules and regulations. So no further lots are being sold up there. This is really more of a maintenance agreement. So just kind of rules of what you can do and can't do up there anymore. I'm sure probably as long as all of us are sitting on this board, we probably won't have anyone coming to do anything with any of the plots up there, but it's good to have this plan in place. So I would like to make a motion that our supervisor sign this rules and regulations for the Warner Cemetery so we can kind of get up to date on what's happening up there and kind of put this one to bed.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries.
Again, Nadine, thank you so much for your work on that.
If I may say, Rick, if you can do like an addendum just to show what we were talking about the, who was gonna.
The appointed contractors?
Yes, the
Okay.
appointed contractors.
So Nadine, were you in there when we were talking about that?
I don't think you need.
Yeah, I don't think we need an
No?
addendum to
Okay.
it. It's just, for
Just
Rick's
something
purpose,
for-
we'll know, he'll have a list, just like we said, like electricians or phone people. We don't need to do an addendum for anything,
Right.
but he'll have a list of who will be
So that we have-
appointed.
Okay. That makes sense.
All right, we'll move on to number 8. We're appointing Pam Griffo as part-time court clerk effective October 30th, 2023 at a rate of $24.31 an hour. This is desperately needed for the courts. Can I get a motion?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. Counselor committee reports and comments. Howard?
Well, I don't want to encroach on anybody else's time, but I do want to mention that we are planning a significant improvement to the Erie Canal Trail in light of the 200th anniversary coming up.
Excellent. Thanks. Jenny?
We got some money for it, and we're gonna get together and design something.
Hopefully something good.
Yes, definitely. I have a couple things. One is, I'm surprised Howard didn't mention this. There is a parade this Saturday, November 4th, for the veterans at the New York State Fair.
The 5th,
It's the 4th.
is it? Okay, Saturday,
Yep,
whatever it
Saturday.
is.
Well, I guess it's a good thing Howard didn't mention it.
I'm surprised he didn't mention it. And then also Kentwood Senior Center, they have their holiday wreath sale. They've got 2 sizes, medium and large, for $30 medium, $35 for large. And they are taking orders until November 18th, so if anybody's interested, please contact the Kentwood's office and Evie will take care of your order. That's it.
Thanks. Mike?
Yeah, I'd like to acknowledge and to thank the Corporal Kyle Schneider Foundation. A little while ago, the process actually started quite a while ago, but they donated automated external defibrillator, an AED. I had to remember what it stood for. The Corporal Kyle Schneider Foundation donated an AED to the parks, and they didn't do it because they want to try to push their way into the parks. They did it because our park needed one. So I just wanted to acknowledge the fact that they did it, number one, that they persevered to work the way through the system to get it done. And now we have that, I think we have 2 now, I believe, just for use at the parks. So it's great, and I wanted to acknowledge them and to thank them.
Great. Darcy?
I don't have anything this evening.
Wendy?
I don't have anything.
Bob?
Nothing tonight.
All right, thank you. Supervisor's comments. Actually, Lynn, is there something I was supposed to say and I forgot it? That I was going to ask you to say that I can't remember what it was.
Counselor Grace?
Guess we'll have to,
Giving me credit, huh?
I can't remember. I guess we'll have to catch up on it. I have no other comments. Doug?
Yeah, real quick. Nobody say the word, but this morning we had some of the stuff come down.
It's so pretty.
Yeah. But a reminder that at our next board meeting will be the first day that our parking ban goes into effect. So please, everybody stay off, not off the roads, but off, do not park on the roads from 2 to 6 in the morning. It makes it substantially more difficult and slower to get the roads safe for all the school buses and for everybody to get to work. So please, 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 stay off the roads or don't park on the roads during those hours and help us out.
Were you out?
We were not, we had, I was out roving it, and there was a bunch of municipalities around us that sent out some hit or miss. We did not, but some of our roads were slippery for about 15 to 20 minutes. There was a little spot,
Yeah.
it melted off instantaneously, but it was borderline, it was close.
Jason, welcome back. Do you have any comments
I
today?
have no comments tonight, thank you.
Nadine?
I have nothing either.
And I'm gonna guess Lynn will also have nothing for us today. All right, seeing there is no other business, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn until November 15th.
into exec session?
Yeah, well, I'm sorry, you are correct. We will be going into an executive session to discuss a personnel matter. I expect no action after. We will,
I expect it to be short.
I hope it's gonna be short.
I'll make a motion, we go into executive session.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Feel free to wait around if you like.